So I'm a feminist. My question is about the role of women, though. What should women's role in public and private life look like, and what are the material benefits of that?
Well, thank you for that. Can I take it? I don't really want to take this detour, but can we both agree on what a woman is?
Yes. An adult human female, it's a biological state of being that is also socially experienced. Can I please elucidate just one example of that social experience?
Yeah, I was going to answer your question, but sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So let's say you're a member of a tribe, and in that tribe, you have the biological female anatomy, and in order to become a woman in that tribe, you have to also get a tattoo. That's a social experience that's mapped onto biological reality.
So can a woman have a prostate?
Can a woman have a prostate? Biologically speaking, a woman is an adult human female that has a biological reality, but it's also social experience, right? So I don't...
Yeah, it's super easy. Like, can a woman have a prostate?
So as per my...
That feels like a really weird statement to me. Can a woman have a prostate? Yes. But I think I have a different definition of what a woman is than she does. Because I don't think a woman is a biological reality. I think we're all biological realities experiencing different ways of interacting with language. Right? Chet says, yes, what about intersex? Yeah, these people never consider intersex people. You just know this bubble just never considers the nuance of the biological experience, you know?
My definition of woman, I would say that people who have a prostate are biological.
Yes, thank you, Chet. The woman part is the social reality, exactly. See, they keep thinking it's the biological part, but the word woman is the social construct. Even the word woman, even to use the words woman, to map on behavior to this thing is the social construct, but they think it's the biological one. But I don't. And so, yeah.
Biologically male, but they can sometimes be socially treated as women.
Okay, got it. So women can have prostates. Got it. Okay. So you're a feminist that actually isn't just fighting for women, you're also fighting for men.
So, yes, men also experience harms from patriarchy, but I argue...
We're talking about the same feminism, though, just make sure. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So men also experience harm from patriarchal domination, but I would argue that those harms come from that system of domination itself. In the same way, for example, this isn't a threat, but if I reached across and punched you in the face, then my hand might hurt, right? So are we understanding that there are, patterns of power? So I would also fight for the rights of men as a feminist, just as I would fight for the rights of women.
Sure. You think women are happier than they were 4 years ago?
I think I would have a...
Okay, let's answer that. Do we think women are happier now than they were 4 years ago? Which women where? How many of them? All over the world? Globally? Or just where? Like where? See how that question isn't a real question? This is why I say debates are not philosophical curiosity or examination, right? So this idea of like, were women happier 4 years ago? The women in my life were happier 4 years ago. They're much more stressed now. They're happier independently, but they're worried about the world around them more now. But the women were like pretty freaking happy 4 years ago in my land. But also women are still just as happy. They're just more stressed about the state of the world. But that's so anecdotal. Like, I don't know all the women in the world, right? Discord says, I wonder if she's trying to throw him a metaphorical bone by saying biological experience. Yeah, maybe. She is a professional debater. She has won awards for debating. So just FYI.
I have a few responses to that. I think that women report more stress and dissatisfaction today because, not because they have more rights or because of feminism, but because they're under dual pressure to both excel professionally and also because of the domestic labor in homes that is structured around outdated expectations. So for example...
But also women exhibit in more external and existential empathy. And so we have a tendency, AFAB people have a tendency to take on universal burden from like the global bubble. So like we literally will feel pain and get depressed over reading the news about people not even in our own countries because we have like we're trained to have a generally more wide net when it comes to empathy and understanding. And that's a part of being trained, sort of AFAB. So I think like the idea is that as the world gets worse, women might get worse because we're thinking about the world versus men are trained to be very selfish, to be very insular, to not care about the world in that regard, right? So they're not going to be as concerned or impacted just because the world is suffering more. And I think that plays a huge role.
For example, studies like the OECD's Better Life Index show that women's life expectancy, education levels, professional achievements have risen in countries with higher gender inequality. So I would argue that what you're calling unhappiness is actually visibility because now we hear women expressing dissatisfaction, whereas in the 50s, we prescribed them Valium and we lobotomized.
Yeah. That's really rich. I didn't know women not to complain 50 years ago. That's funny. Hold on a second. Why are suicide rates going up more for women?
I I think that
Forget
encourages.
complaining. Materially, women are killing themselves more. Why is that?
I feel like women kill themselves because the burden of the world is too much, and men kill themselves because they think they're too much of a burden. In a different sense, obviously, it's not monolithic, the experience, and I would say that it's individualistic at the end of the day. But if we were to say that like queer people and trans people are being attacked more at higher numbers, women can be found in those categories. Bisexual women are identifying in more numbers. And I think we're like forgetting that all these things are playing a role. But Chet said something really important, which is like 4 years ago is no time. Might as well ask women if they were happier last week. I think we also forget that, you know, in the individual's life, 4 years can sound like a lot, but, you know, we don't know how changes will impact the general population until a few years into the future. It's like the way the presidency works, where everyone thinks like, oh, you know, this presidency is a reflection of this president versus the fact that it's probably the impact of the president before them or the president before that. It's like we don't even know why things are happening. So he is saying, hey, there's a problem. He thinks he knows why. She thinks she knows why. And I would argue that we actually probably don't know exactly why. We probably just don't have enough information. You know, it's not like we're doing polls and gathering information from enough people. And so I don't think we actually know why. I think we pretend to know why. And again, I also think the answer is a deeper why than the why we say. I think it's deeper than the fact that like men can't find jobs or they're not graduating college or women can't find partners. I think it goes back to Vervaeke's idea around the meaning crisis. We are without a meaning. And it doesn't mean because we're without God. It means because we're having a more of an awakening as a globe towards an idea that maybe there's a possibility that maybe there isn't even a God. And then what does that mean? That's a whole new can of worms. Every time you have a realization the thing you thought was true isn't true, it's going to lead to problems. That's why you can't have a baby without inherent harm. It's why every new human who comes into the world adds new complex and a new layer of what if. It's why even if the world was all these like magical enlightened fives, you know, links in the description for my levels, it doesn't mean that those fives wouldn't give birth to new babies, and those new babies would have to go on the journey of why and their meaning and their relationship to meaning, right? Chet says, are they going to tie the male loneliness epidemic into this debate? I wonder. Let's see.
I think that even if both men and women have become unhappier, men's suicide rates have risen as well, and that's also been exponential. Can you at least concede that feminism offers only one potential explanation? There could be also other explanations.
Of course, obviously, but feminism is the glaring thing in front of us, where we have fertility rates down, we have marriage rates down, we have unhappiness up, and we did something in the 1960s out of the universities of Brady Friedan.
So not the economy, not men's doing, not the genocide in Palestine, not the genocide around Africa, not like any of those things. Not the fact that Amazon and Elon and all these things have actually contributed through their businesses more harm to the planet and to people. Not the fact that mental health has declined because of your use on Twitter, or the fact that like nobody can afford to live. See, none of those things, just might be the feminism.
Dan and Gloria Steinem and all these feminists that basically said you're trapped in a home, go get a job, freeze your eggs, take birth control, and all of a sudden women are way unhappier than they were 40 years ago. And I just have to ask the question, why is that? Is it working? And maybe there are biological differences between men and women that we should respect.
And then here we go, the biological differences between men and women. See, conservatives love biology, but not when it comes to the question about free will, huh?
Deep down, a lot of women want to get married and have children. In fact, we should applaud it and we should support it. And we should say it means nothing if you're going to go be a CEO of some shoe company or be some banker in London. What matters if you raise children and you have something to pass down long after you're gone.
I think I would bring 2 points to that. The first one is just really simple, which is that you can ascribe liberalism all you want as the cause of the unhappiness. I would argue something else. I would say that it's certain economic policy that has very little to do with the social acceptance of alternative lifestyles. I would say that we can recognize that income inequality across a vast swathe of Western countries has increased, which causes all kinds of social ills, a lack of social cohesion, housing price growth doesn't correspond with wage growth, monopolies increasingly become...
And by the way, him putting that judgment on it, Chet says this is so unserious. It's actually insane that this is Cambridge. You know, it's a reflection of the culture. But that's what I mean. The culture's just struggling with the meaning crisis because it is so unserious. Assigning a role to every woman as wanting to inherently have children and be a mother and pass down genetics is so unserious. It's just so unserious.
Kind of emboldened to interfere with politics, and monopolies don't prioritize social health.
Chet says she talks so fast. Guys, I have it at 1.2 speed. If you guys want me to put it on regular speed, I can, but she does talk fast.
Either. I think that those offer more compelling reasons for a decline in happiness than an increase in freedoms, because just one more thing, on an intuitive basis, generally speaking, people want more freedom, not less.
Okay, so if that's true, why is it, do you agree that the happiest women in the West are married with kids?
I would have to look into it, but I think there are certain
and
studies that
objectively
do-
we know that, right? The women with kids are not
No.
the ones tearing down statues, right? They're the ones that actually.
This is like the men blaming the boomer divorce rate on like women and feminism instead of recognizing that women were finally allowed to leave their abusive marriages.
Actually have obligations.
Does tearing down statues correspond to some kind of smiles per capita data set that I wasn't aware
I mean,
of?
again, it's a little bit of a one-liner. The happy and the grateful. The happy and the grateful usually don't go burn down Wendy's in their spare time, of which we saw in our
What?
country all throughout a single summer. But as a side note, you would agree,
What?
objectively, study after study, survey after survey, that the women of the West that are married and have children, especially a lot of children, are far happier than even the ones that earn more money correlated at the same age.
So I also don't think that happiness is a very good metric, and neither do you, because you think gay people shouldn't just pursue happiness by being gay. They have other moralistic considerations to be making. So I don't think smiles per capita is a particularly convincing way to measure whether or not we should encourage women to be autonomous. I think we should maximize agency within a fair system that has reasonable parameters because it's expedient, it's good for the economy, it's logical, it's a moral thing, because if we can't prove the material harms, we shouldn't discourage it. And also self-reported studies is a really flawed way to do psychology. It's the week before my university exams right now, and I'm standing here explaining the basic methodology behind survey collection in sociology, which you don't even think is a real subject, to Charlie Kirk. If I took one of those surveys right now, I'd check extremely miserable. But so would a Palestinian child who's been torn to smithereens. How are we going
You
to
would say
measure
extremely miserable?
No, I'm kind of making a joke.
No, I mean, but seriously, like, but hold on. I mean, like, that's an important point, though, is that the women in the West have it the best in the world, and yet they're way unhappier than women of sub-Saharan Africa. There's something fundamentally wrong here, because the women of sub-Saharan Africa have something that a lot of women in the West do not have. The women in the West have cats, and they have good jobs, and the women of sub-Saharan Africa, they have a belief in the divine, and they have kids. And maybe there's a biological undercurrent that is keeping a lot of women from realizing their full potential. And so without reading your phone and just like, connecting,
I'm not really reading my phone.
well, it's fine. Sure, then you can answer without it. Fair enough. Would you agree that it's a good thing that more women get married and have children in the West?
I would ask you, would you say that a sub-Saharan African woman who's experienced female genital mutilation and checks extremely happy in a survey, and I also would check extremely happy in a survey, who do you think would be objectively more happy, even if they both check the same answer?
No, again, so I fully, if you want to talk about how Islam mistreats women, we could talk all day long. Like, I'm all for that.
Well, Yeah, Chad says it's not even Islam that does that to women, it's men. Why did he attach it to Islam? I think the issue is that in a debate, he's already decided what's true is true. And he's not really using data. He's really just using his idea of what's right to collect the data that makes sense. And I know this because, again, when you're a lifelong Republican, when you're Christian forever, it tells me you haven't looked at the data and you've never changed your mind. So if Charlie Kirk shows us the data and understands that the data doesn't, it's like when people decide objective means like the majority agrees. Yes, sure, but also no. Like, I'm thinking I want the objective outside of our perception, whether it's true whether you like it or not, versus if you use the majority to come to a conclusion that it's true, that's not objective. That's just a consensus, like an agreement on information. So if everyone agrees that the sky is purple, I guess the sky is purple now. I understand sometimes it's purple, but like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, like the sky is always purple. That's a default color. The sky is like neon green. It's like, I want to know if it's true, whether we exist or not. That's what I think objective is. Objective to me is like, it is true whether a human perceives it or declares it to be true. And so that's why we create a myth of God or the fly on the wall, because they're going to have access to, quote, an aerial view of the truth because they're not impacted by that interaction with the truth. But since God comes from the human mind, he's obviously impacted with his judgment based off of what the humans decide he will create judgment around. So Charlie Kirk is like an unreliable narrator when it comes to the possibility of objective to begin with. And then on top of that, like there is just like a desire or a requirement of humility to exist in a world that's actually problem solving for real and not just out of ego, which Charlie Kirk obviously doesn't embody.
For that?
Me too.
Okay, good. So we agree.
Absolutely.
We actually have
We agree on many things.
Then we should shut off Muslim immigration to the UK, right? We totally agree.
I think that all religious fundamentalism is bad, and if you take that logic, we should also not allow evangelical Christians into
Okay,
the UK either.
hold on. So hold on a second. Hold on. That's funny. Hold on. Can you show me show me what would your example, because I have 50, of a single Christian country that you would say mistreats women, right?
America.
Oh, really?
Yes.
We had a female woman vice president. We had a female vice president, a female speaker of the House. Women earn more than men in America.
In Rwanda, female representation in government supersedes the UK by quite a lot. Do women get treated better in Rwanda?
Okay, I might be super off this. Like, is Rwanda Islamic? Like, I'm not totally sure. I don't think it is. Like, is it? Like, I don't know, actually. It's not. So, again, we were talking about Islam. It's a little bit of a side note, but you must be morally clear, because you brought up female genital mutilation, which is a teaching of the Islamic faith. But as a side note, like, again, this is very important which is I'm not here to require you to do anything or not. I'm making a simple observation, which is objectively true regardless. The women of the West are miserable, and they're miserable for a reason, because we've told them to suppress how they are made by God and pursue something else and get a bunch of trinkets and get a bunch of promotions, and they end up at 38 years old with a big flat in London, and they're miserable. And we should tell them to stop freezing their eggs and start finding their partner earlier and have lots of babies.
Well, they're miserable because, again, this goes back to Vervaeke's meaning crisis. Like, having a baby and finding a partner wasn't working for our mothers or grandmothers in the same way that we think. So why is it going to work for us? Chet says, what is this narrative? It's the narrative of misogyny, baby. Chet says, arguing against guys like this is like banging your head against a wall because he's already decided everything. Well, that's why. That's the issue, is like he's already decided. That's why it's so unserious, you know? And it's funny. They'll say, oh, why are they miserable? I'll tell you. And they're like, no, that can't be it. Have a baby. And look, I grew up with parents like that. I mean, one of the reasons I genuinely have stopped talking to my parents is frequently, not like in a malicious way, but in a very like open with boundaries way. I love my parents. They're so like kind in their own way, but I'm trying to teach them that like I'm not having a baby for a reason, but they can't get it out of their heads that if I have a baby, my life will be better. And I'm trying to get them to understand that I promise you having a baby will not improve my life. And they at 65 years old cannot conceptualize a reality where that's true. So you want to go back to that conversation about free will? How much free will can you have if you can't even entertain the reality that women might not be happy just because they had a baby? Like, genuinely, you think you have free will and you can't even entertain that the world doesn't revolve around your universal belief about people? So then I have compassion for them because I don't think they have a choice in what they believe. I think they don't actually engage in enough free will in this regard to deconstruct the idea that maybe having a baby isn't what's needed. And also, I'm very happy. They just think I could be more happy. And I'm like, yeah, like, but I'm good. Like, I would be less happy with a baby than more happy with a baby. Now, if I had a baby, I would make it after a very hard time of being unhappy into a happy situation, but it would be very hard for a long time. Before, you know what I mean? And it's not about the child. You're always happy for the child, but the circumstances in which, you know, in the circumstances that had to come about that created the child would probably be pretty horrible and stressful. But they don't think about that, right?
Yeah, okay. I think I'd bring two just final points to this. First one is just really intuitive, right? Which is that if you actually care about women's happiness, then the solution is to structurally support them. That means universal childcare, shared legally enforceable parental leave. And in Nordic countries where women have high workforce participation and also some state support, they report higher life satisfaction than in more conservative countries, including America. So if your metric is happiness,
just use satisfaction surveys. You just told me they're BS.
So are satisfaction surveys bullshit or not? Because you told me
do you acknowledge satisfaction surveys or not? You just told me that they're BS. Do you think they're objective? We can use that as data?
I don't think that
yes or no?
it's the only sole data set, but it is a data set that
you told me they're so
matters.
flawed and you self-report. Okay, by the macro self-satisfaction data, I am correct. And you are right. When you have paid family leave, you are happier. I'm actually a proponent of that. At Turning Point USA, we pay for 6 months when somebody has a child. I think there's a lot of agreement we can have on that. We need to encourage having more children. I think the Hungarian child policy is phenomenal. We should look at that because the greatest thing that is plaguing the West is we're not having enough kids. And it's not just bad because we won't have a future. It's also bad because the present is awfully miserable for too many women as well.
Okay, in which case I think we get...
Start bringing this to a close, please.
Okay, I think just one final thing, which is that in which case we get to a really interesting argument about what parts of womanhood can be demarcated to the social and what kinds of womanhood can be demarcated to the biological. So, for example, my anatomy is demarcated to the biological, but the fact that I might potentially be a better nurturer than a man, I would demarcate that to the social, you might demarcate that to the biological, in which case we have differing moral scales of value. I would ask why we should necessarily...
I think it's either or depending on the person, but I am really good at nurturing, but I guarantee you my partner would be better. If we had a child, I am a pretty good mom in the nurturing sense, but my partner would be a better one because they're much more calm and patient, and I'm much more rigid, and I'm more like military mom, but like also giggly, huggy mom. And they would be more like soft-spoken, considerate, patient mom, would move at the pace of the child, and I have less patience. And so I think like if we had children, it would be a combination of both. We both have a biological predisposition, and then on top of that, we're socialized, but our personalities are vastly different. I'm just a very aggressive, like look at me, you know, versus my partner is much more soft. And I think that they could be a better nurturer for our child, regardless of their biological gender. They would just be better at that. And that is biological. That is inherent in their personality. And then there's the social construct around gender. And like, what does that mean? Since our marriage doesn't take gender into account, our parenting wouldn't either. Like our parenting wouldn't be about gender. It'd be about who's the best person at this thing, regardless of gender. Versus Charlie Kirk is arguing this idea that like women will be better. People believe like women are inherently better caretakers or nurturers, but I just know that to be not true. I mean, everyone is good at what they're good at, and everyone is always better than you, and somebody's always worse than you.
They prioritize your moral scale of value, which prioritizes things like the birth rate, when in actual fact there are various other moral scales of value. And if you yourself are a free market American, why is it the case that you would not, like the previous speaker noted,
I've already answered
extend personal freedoms towards all spheres, including a private sphere?
I believe in absolute
for own
truth
ends?
claims, and it's absolutely wrong and bad when a society stops having kids to replace their own population, and then you have to import the third world, and you become the third world. It's bad.
Oh, it's a bit racist, isn't it? What? I don't think you can say that, bro. So you start importing the third world, so you become the third world? Whoa. Whoa. First of all, we say developing world now because third world is a racist dog whistle, but also, whoa, sir. Whoa. This is why pro-lifers aren't pro-life. They're just pro-white babies. Oh, that's why they're racist. Because people have been saying that if you really cared about pro-life or replacing the population, you'd allow immigrants to come in. You know what I mean? Ooh, girl. Ma'am.
I disagree, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that was the end of that. Yeah, I think conversations like this are basically a waste of time. People, were criticizing this woman for using her footnotes, but basically she just said like she does debating professionally. Basically, she's won awards. She's a student, yes. Not professionally like Charlie Kirk does it professionally. He literally gets paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to have these conversations. But that she was using her notes as just a way to have footnotes that she shared to the internet. I thought it was interesting. I will just say like, this is not for me. Like this, I have no desire to have these conversations because I think they're shallow. I think they're meaningless. I think they feel really good. And I think they can help two bubbles move in a direction, but no one's actually having a very deep conversation. And of course, you'll say it's a 15-minute debate, Brittany. Of course they're not. But even more than that, the topics are so unserious. Women are unhappy for lots of reasons, but I actually think women are literally doing better. But I think any person, regardless of gender, who doesn't know their place in the universe is going to struggle. And I think that is the next crisis at hand. And I think we see it coming. I actually think that's why my levels are going to resonate with so many more people in different ways, whether they're 2s or 5s. I really think like in the next 10 to 20 years, we will have a crisis of actual meaning, like a real displacement of understanding of the self. And it will require great introspection, extrospection. And it's not going to come without great sacrifice. And the sacrifice is going to be to our ego, which is good because you're going to need that humility to introspect. And it is, you're going to have to sacrifice your ego, Charlie Kirk. You're going to have to sacrifice your ego, Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson and Ethan Klein and all these people. You're going to have to sacrifice that ego because it is stopping the world from getting to the next step. The next step is humility. Now, the world will not all experience humility at once, but I think that's what's next. Tell me the last time this great United States of America had any ounce of humility. And you wonder why it's crumbling. Because you're egotistical and narcissistic. Our country really is the Logan Paul of the globe. And I think not only is the world sick of it, but I think we're even sick of ourselves.